What do you think are some of the skill sets that you brought from your previous roles that helped you hit the ground running so quickly, so to speak?
So I think it's a couple of things. Probably two of the most important are being organized and just being as you said, get shit done kind of person, like crossing stuff off the list and just
Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Female Empowered Podcast. I am your host, Krista Gurka, and I'm really excited for this series. It'll probably be a two-part series. I am going to introduce you to my team, my Krista Gurka / Pilates in the Grove team. I think it's great to kind of like pull back the curtain and give people a real life view of where the magic happens and truthfully who makes the magic happen, because it's not all on me. So if you are thinking of growing a team, or if you have a team and you're wondering what other businesses teams look like, these next couple episodes you should listen to. So today I have with me my Chief Operating Officer, Executive Director, Lauren Amron, who's relatively new to the company, just the last couple months. And I also have our Director of Studio Operations, Kelly. I don't know. Is it Montgomery or Vara these days? I don't know which one are
Officially
we?
Vara, but Montgomery's fine too. I'll answer to either.
Montgomery Vara then. So she just recently got married, and actually hasn't been that recently. But so I'm going to have them each introduce themselves with their background so you can kind of see what their degree, I'm doing degrees in air quotes, are, and then we're going to get into some questions. So Kelly, since you've been here a little bit longer, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell everyone how you came to work for Pilates in the Grove, and what capacity you're working in currently.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kelly. I am originally from Michigan. I moved to Miami about 4 years ago. My husband is from here, so we ended up making the move down here when he was done with his training. I am a physical therapist. I went to school in Boston. And then after PT school, I ended up moving back to Michigan, where I started working in an outpatient physical therapy office that had reformers. And they used Pilates as a mode of our rehabilitation, but it wasn't consistent across the patient caseload. It really was for particular people who would be able to tolerate that type of modality. So anyway, when I was moving down to Miami, I decided to search to see if there were places that incorporated more Pilates with physical therapy. So there were 3 studios that popped up on my Google search, and one of them was Pilates in the Grove. So I reached out just on a whim, sent my resume. Hey, I'm looking for a job, pick me, choose me, I'm here. And coincidentally, Krista responded and ended her email saying, "Go Blue." So both of us are Michigan grads. I felt like right away it was fate. So here we are 4 years later. I started as a physical therapist and Pilates instructor. I went through Pilates training through Pilates in the Grove. And then in 2021, I transitioned into the director of studio management role. And I'm still in that role here today.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, her resume that came through that said that she was a Michigan grad, I was like, unless this person's like a total debacle moron, she's definitely going to be a part of my team. And then I met her in person and everything has been like wonderful after that. Kelly and I did a podcast episode. I can't remember what the episode number is, but it is about how to promote from within. So promoting someone who is a clinician into a management role. And I thought it was really good. So if you want to search in the podcast, she gave some really helpful tips to make that happen. So we're going to get into a little bit of what she does in a moment. But Lauren, who just joined our team, I believe in March. So Lauren, why don't you introduce yourself? Please do not leave out all your degrees and tell us in what capacity you've joined Pilates in the Grove.
Hi, as Krista said, my name is Lauren. I have been in Miami almost 30 years, so not native, but originally from New York, but kind of native these days. And I have an undergrad degree in marketing and then a law degree and an MBA in finance. So I've kind of run the gamut of business education and worked for many years in consulting. I did management consulting, litigation consulting, corporate reorg, post-bankruptcy consulting, fiduciary work. And so lots of detail-oriented spreadsheet type stuff and cleaning up lots of messes, as Krista would say. So that's my professional experience. I also did some work coaching teens and kids with food choices and healthy eating, healthy lifestyle, and was head of HR and in-house counsel for construction consulting companies. So lots of different industries and businesses over about 30 years, and was super happy when this opportunity was presented to me to come in and just help run things and keep everything moving smoothly here at Pilates in the Grove, and be with a really exceptional team of mostly women, but people who are really just a pleasure to be around every day.
Oh, thank you. Lauren, in her amazingly organized fashion, has really helped organize my life too, and then hence keep everyone else on track. So it's been really great. And I think that what we'll get into is the change and evolution of like the role that Lauren currently sits in now, since I first hired for that role back in 2018. So if any of you have followed my story before, I founded Pilates in the Grove back in 2010. And basically between 2010 and 2018, we more than quadrupled our growth. And however, and our staff got better, but I had no executive team. I had no leadership team. I had no management team, whatever you want to call it. I had no one between myself and clinicians and administrators. And so that was really not sustainable. So in 2018, I hired our first director of operations, which was Steve. So if you've been following, he'd been on the podcast for a while. He came in and really helped clean up operations, like helped us put everything that was in my head onto paper, helped us create internal communication systems. I believe Steve was already with us, Kelly, when you started. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So he really, really helped, because at the time I didn't even really understand what technology was available for us to use. I didn't know the thought of teaching people how to use that technology, me learning a new technology just seemed really overwhelming. And I hear that from a lot of business owners, like, it's just easier for me to still do it on paper and pencil. And while I get that, and I understand the frustration, I'm telling you that in the long run, it's not easier. It's easier to go through a little discomfort now to help set up your systems better, more efficient, so that in the future, you can just have a little bit more ease and efficiency. So let me talk first to, let me ask you this, Kelly. You started like at the end of 2019, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we all know what happened in March of 2020. So she had basically, her schedule was full. She was like, when you transition into a cash-based setting, it's not just like, here's 40 clients right away, but she had already gotten in March of 2020 hit. One of the things that I saw in Kelly during that time was she was always asking, like, how can I help? How can I help? How can I make it easier? What can I do? What do you need me to do? And obviously, from an owner's perspective, what was happening March, April, May of 2020 was really stressful. So that in itself was a skill set that I was like, okay, this is like a great managerial skill, leadership skill, saying, what can I do? So what was that transition like for you, Kelly, going from clinician to more of a leadership managerial role? And Kelly, I will say, has a hybrid role. So she still teaches a little bit and treats patients. So do you kind of just want to describe what that transition was like for you?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I remember very vividly when 2020 hit. I had never been in a position where I really didn't have much to do. So I remember thinking at the time that, well, I thought just from the beginning, Krista and I had a really good relationship that was very open-ended feedback on both sides. I felt like I really could reach out to Krista about anything, which is actually what prompted me to like continue to ask, like, hey, what can I do? Because I'm sitting here and like, put me to use. I can do stuff, I can do something. So once we came back from COVID and got things back rolling, Krista, you had asked me to meet, just like, you're like, oh, let's have a conversation on Friday, we can catch up. And like at the end of the conversation, Chris was like, so we would like to promote you to be a manager. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, huh? So of course I gladly accepted the position. I think that in the educational world of being in medicine, there's not a lot on the business end that you learn in school. And unless I did have a clinical where I worked directly with the owner of physical therapy clinics that were around the area, but the clinical was really focused more on my clinician skills and not the business side. So it was challenging. But what I did really like was this hybrid role where I could always fall back on using my Pilates and physical therapy to, clear my head for the day and then be able to prepare for anything else that I needed to do. The onboarding process was extremely helpful. Krista, you gave me your information for your FitBiz Foundations course. So I learned a lot through that. I worked one-on-one with Steve, our COO at the time. I met with him multiple times a week, just being like, I'm sorry, what was that we were talking about?
So did I, by the way.
Do I need?
I was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I think then also one of the challenges of the role was, literally that transition of being a clinician and then transitioning into being my coworkers, like boss kind of, or person that they report to. So that definitely was a shift in relationships and how things run, not in a bad way at all. Our team is really amazing, but you don't always want to go out with your boss for drinks on a Friday. So that definitely was challenging, but I think over time, once things kind of settled down and my role has kind of blossomed into what it is now, I don't really even feel that way anymore. So, I could talk about this all day, but I think that the onboarding process, mentorship between you, Krista, and our COO at the time, just constantly checking in, making sure everything was good. And then again, being able to rely on my own skills as like a PT or Pilates instructor really did make the difference in the transition.
Awesome. Yeah, I thought you transitioned great, So Lauren, having been in the company, just what is it, over 2 months? What are we at? Just about 2 months, roughly. Mm-hmm. What are some things that you feel like you brought from your corporate background, your previous background, that could I feel like you kind of like jumped right in feet first and took off running. I felt like the onboarding process was, at least on my part. So what do you think are some of the skill sets that you brought from your previous roles that helped you hit the ground running so quickly, so to speak?
So I think it's a couple of things. Probably two of the most important are being organized and just being as you said, get shit done kind of person, like crossing stuff off the list and just thinking always in my mind, what should I do or what could I do to take things off of revenue generating assets? And in a people business, revenue generating assets are people. So we sell time, right? You only have 24 hours in the day. Presumably some of them you're going to sleep and do other things. So let's say you have 8 hours to sell. If you're spending some of those hours doing administrative tasks, that's money lost, an opportunity cost lost for you or for Kelly or for whichever service provider is doing those things. And so I think that mindset sort of guides me in how I choose to prioritize my tasks and my time. And then the other thing would be how to keep things running as smoothly for our customers. So anything that would make the studio run more smoothly for them, whether that's our waitlist policies or our advertising new processes or programs that we're using, different programs we're starting up for the summer or for teen athletes, things like that, that make the experience better for our customer, whatever needs to be done in the back end part of that. Since I'm not actually providing the service and I'm a cost center, not a revenue generator, my focus is always on making the best environment or opportunity for those who are generating revenue for the business.
That's awesome. I've never actually heard anyone describe it like trying to optimize the revenue generating hours and kind of like balance that with the opportunity costs. Like that was a really perfect, I'm actually going to clip it. That's going to be one of our sound bites. So I thought that was a really great way of looking at it. And so awesome. Why I think you're excelling at this job. So let's then let people know kind of, and again, we don't have to go through every little detail of what you guys do, but if we're looking at, in our company, we call it an accountability chart. Some people call it an org chart, organizational chart. So I, as CEO, I hate the saying sit at the top, but if you're looking at it from a pyramid, like everyone reports to me, but then we have Kelly and Lauren, and so they're accountable for certain tasks. Now we all work together very well, but Lauren, what so far to date are some of the things that you are accountable for in the company?
So I would say the two biggest things in terms of time would be the finance piece, which is not really bookkeeping and not really strategic, as Krista mentioned, but more payroll, cash flow, managing our bookkeeper and information flow to her. I would say that takes a chunk of the time. And the other part would be really in partnership with Kelly. I think there's an HR piece, and we really have done that hand in hand. Kelly does more of the forward-facing piece of it, but being a resource for her, just in terms of my experience there, is a piece of it. And then all of the little bits and scraps, like all of the, I sit on the marketing calls, even though I'm not responsible directly for marketing. I sit on calls to help with logistics, organization, whether that be tangible in studio or sort of bigger picture, longer term goals and things that we're looking at bringing on, and whatever little pieces need to be done for that. So I think that, and then I think it's just being really supportive as this team, being on the same tier with Kelly and just making sure we have each other's backs for whatever we need, and supporting our admin people, our client-facing admin people. I also think, just from my experience in HR, it's really important to have a physical presence, at least some of the time. I think people really value that, and they want to see that the people in management know what they're going through day to day. They know what it's like in the studio or whatever brick and mortar operation you have, and just being there for them as a resource and just building those relationships. I think it goes a really long way. So
Yeah,
I've been working on that in the first 2 months.
I definitely agree with that about like the just like face presence, you know, like being there on site. Because I had a job once a long time ago, obviously, but this person I worked, it was at a PT clinic, and the owner's wife was a lot of the person sometimes telling us what to do or suggesting things, but she was never there. And I was like, it's really, I took it almost like how do you know what's even going on here? You're never here. You don't see in real life what's happening. Now, I don't believe people have to be there all the time, but it's true. You have to understand like what the flow of things and how are people acting and just listening. So I think that's great. For those of you in the inner circle, Lauren was the one that basically like kept all the ships moving during our most recent retreat. Logistics, she put together group texts of like, this is where you're going to go, this is your driver's name, which helped me tremendously because I wasn't even feeling well right before the retreat. So like she kept in contact with the inn, with the bed and breakfast. She talked to the transportation company. She was in charge, of the restaurants and all of that stuff. And so from a logistics standpoint, that was phenomenal. We're updating recovery services for Pilates in the Grove. So she like ordered all this stuff, took the stuff out of the boxes, put the boxes away. I mean, it sounds like, honestly, this is the one great thing about Lauren. She has an MBA and a law degree, and she wasn't above saying, I'm just going to unbox the stuff and put it together in the room. So this is where we all work as a team, and where she's just been, I mean, I am like, my life just in 2 months has gotten so much better. So there's a lot of that organization that has been really, really, really helpful on both sides, the Krista Gurka coaching side and the Pilates in the Grove side. And like she said, she kind of sits on calls, even on the marketing call, because then if I'm on a different call, she's like, hey, Krista, remember you committed to XYZ. I think that's going to interfere with the other thing you just committed yourself to. So maybe reel that back.
I think one of the other things, just sort of overarching tasks, is trying to anticipate. So like, think a little bit like what you're saying, trying to think ahead where an issue could pop up, whether that's a calendar issue for our small team, or the schedule, or just based on experience, like generally when this happens. And so just trying to be that think ahead person, calendar observer, and just really trying to use that sort of perspective to keep everybody else thinking about those issues that could arise.
Totally. And I think, to transition over to Kelly, I think that is one of the things that you have learned over this last couple of years being in the managerial role, where now you have privy to some of the, I say the back end conversations, because I think I'm pretty transparent with what we talk about, but some of the reasoning as to like why we choose to do things. So why don't we transition to like, what are some of the things you do now in addition to your clinical work, obviously from a leadership role? And then if maybe you want to talk a little bit about what that like anticipatory piece is when you're like, oh yeah, I thought this one thing, but now I see like this is actually how it transpires. So first, that was like 7 questions in one. But first, why don't you give a little bit about what does your like week look like in a leadership role as director of studio operations?
Studio management.
Because
Because I was gonna say we have our operator is Lauren over there. But no, so I would say just in general, anything that happens within the 4 walls of the studio is me. So whether that's managing our admin team, managing our staff, client facing issues, like equipment management, just solving problems. Another big thing for me is that I'm also on the floor. So I have that perspective of knowing what's going on. If there's like lights that are flickering, or like I lay down on a reformer and take a class and I'm like, oh, that bothers me, that has to bother somebody else, I'll take care of that. Or and then anything from managing what the class schedules look like, trying to maximize our utilization, getting into some more of those like numbers of converting new clients, being part of our sales pipeline, being that one touch point that we're trying to really maximize our brands with a new client so that they want to stay. They know who the manager is. They have my email. I hopefully met them in studio. Oh gosh, I feel like
Vacation requests,
Oh yes,
vacation requests, onboarding
PTO
new clinical
on,
staff.
yep, and onboarding, yes. So that's a whole other part. So again, anything that has to do with our staff, whether it's hiring, letting go, whatever the case may be, that's me. Also with help from the team.
But
like
Kelly's
Lauren,
really taken over that role of hiring. So she does, you know, the ads, she reviews the resumes, she does the initial like Zoom or phone interview, she does the interviews, she makes the final decision, she helps, you know, create the offer letters, she does the performance reviews on them now, the 30, 60, 90-day offers. And then ultimately, if we're moving away from somebody, you know, that's her, she, you know, owns that as well. So for those of you that have thought like you'd never be out of that role as the owner, it is possible. 90% of that is letting your ego go and allowing somebody else to sit in that role. Kelly cares about the company just as much as I do, and she doesn't want anyone on board that's going to make her life easier, because she's the one that now has to also deal with the back end of that, right? So she comes to me with, I think this is a good fit and here's why, or I think these are the hours that we should do, or you know what, I don't think we should move that person into this other role and here's why. And I'm telling you, CEOs, the majority of the reason you think other people can't do the job is because you're in your ego saying that it has to be your way. And so Kelly has really taken on a lot of that direct to team member, like client facing team members roles. And I know that's been really, really challenging. And you have done it with grace. And, you know, I super appreciate that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. That's like a big leap from clinician to manager, like you said, being in that kind of leadership role. What was that like for you? And you can be perfectly honest. You can be like, this is the part of the job I like the least. I mean, it's part of the job I liked the least. So what was that like for you, or is like for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think difficult conversations just across the board they're challenging. I mean, they're going to be stressful. There's going to be, you know, angst that leads up to that event, and then it happens, and then you debrief and you move on. But I think that the biggest piece that makes that easier is a team that's going to support you. And like I said before, like bi-directionally supporting each other, without having you, Krista, or Lauren have my back, it would make those decisions a lot harder. So what I appreciate too is that my opinion does matter. And if I want to try something, no one's telling me, no, just don't do it. Don't do that. Don't do it. It's almost like I'm also given the reins to try things out and see if it works or if it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. If it works, then great. We gave it a try and it was a success. So yeah, like I said, I mean, of course there's things. Difficult conversations are difficult conversations. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter, you know, any difficult conversation with someone who's also human is tough. But again, without the support of really the team, you know, the executive team first and foremost, but also the support of the other team members and coworkers that we have, I would say 95% of the time, any decision we make at the executive level is actually trickled into the whole staff. And after like a decision is made, you know, pretty much everybody feels the relief too. So it is nice to be supported on either end. After like a difficult conversation that I had a couple weeks ago, one of our instructors gave me a call that night and was like, you know, today was probably a really rough day for you, but I want to say thank you for, you know, taking charge of that and taking ownership of that, and you handled it with grace. And I just want to say, like, I hope you have wine and have a good night. So again, like, it's just nice to have that support on either end. And, if you make a mistake, you live, you learn. That's life. But that support is like the most important part to me, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think I can speak for myself for this too. One of the hardest things for me was letting people make mistakes. It's, if you're a parent, it's the same thing, like knowing when you're like, you can see it happening, this is not going to end well. However, if we as owners or even as parents are always jumping in to help our kids or help our team do their job, nobody will ever realize that for themselves, right? And so it's hard because ultimately, as an owner, we think, oh, now I'm going to have to deal with a complaint or I'm going to have to deal with a repercussion. What I would say is, how about we flip that mindset and say, give someone the bandwidth, right? The agency to see it through to fruition. So in other words, if there is something that happens, a consequence, those all have negative terms, but then that person should have to, they'll handle the customer questions, or they'll handle the staff being confused, or like allow that to go through the entire process, which is hard, but it's the way people learn. So I love what you said about difficult conversations. And I'd love to ask you guys this question, because it's really like a mindset thing, I think. So Lauren, if you like to have difficult conversations, and you're a masochist, I'm sorry, but like nobody likes to have difficult conversations. In you preparing to maybe have a difficult or challenging conversation, what are some things that you do, or what are some things that you think to help get you through that?
So I would say being confident in your reasoning, right? So you have policies and procedures in place, depending on what the nature of the conversation is, that are well established and are communicated, right? So if you have somebody breaking a rule, whether that's a client or a staff member, then it's not as difficult because you can point to reasoning. And then again, knowing the team supports you, like it's much easier to have the conversation knowing that you've already sort of vetted it through this group or whatever group you use as a resource to bounce things off of. And on the literal side, sometimes just practicing it a little bit, like role playing or going through the scenarios in your mind, if not with another person. I think Kelly and I did that a little bit recently, and it's helpful. And it's helpful also to the non-participant in that little exercise to think through, well, this is where I think you may run into a challenge in that conversation. So maybe we should prepare for that as well. Just helps mitigate the anxiety that comes with having those conversations. So that would sort of be my tactic on it.
That was great feedback. What about you, Kelly?
What about me in terms of, there was a lot of good things that you just said.
What have you tried to implement, or some things that help you when you have to have a difficult or challenging conversation?
Sure. Yeah. So one of my biggest things personally for how I learn and how I like to do things is just, again, talk to people who have experience, talk to people who, are good at giving advice. I have some particular go-tos, obviously, between you two and the team, the executive team at Pilates and the Growth, but I also have my sister who is in the business world, and I usually run things by her and get some really good advice. And my parents, same thing. They've had this experience, things that they have gone through in life that they can bring a different outside perspective. So talking about it, role playing, or like saying in my head, typing out what I'm going to say, even I'm not going to like read it off of the computer, of course, but sometimes just like writing out the words, or like, ooh, that's not how I want to say it. Or, oh, that could, like Lauren said, that could lead to a can of worms that like, we don't really want to go there. So, I mean, interestingly, difficult conversations, I think they require more preparation than telling someone that they're doing a great job, or even like a performance review. I feel like I don't even prepare for those as much as a difficult conversation with someone. So again, just like having people to help go through that thought process on the business side, to go through the how you're going to deliver it, and like HR side. And then anyone who is experienced in business, is just great to bounce those ideas off of them, I think.
Great. Both of you said, practicing or having, someone to bounce ideas off with. It's one of the things that we see in the inner circle and the FitBiz Foundation's communities a lot. People will come into that group or come on a coaching call or post in our Facebook group like, hey, I had this situation happen in the studio or in the clinic today. I'd just love to get some support on what's a way to do it, right? All three of us are also in our boutique fitness solutions mastermind groups. We're all in different groups. I'm in the CEO group. Lauren just started her leadership group, and Kelly's in the management group. And I think that having that community for us to go to and ask other people, sometimes we're not looking for the answer. We're just looking for just like situations, right? Situational. This is what helped me. So having a community, I really think, whether that community be girlfriends, friends, networking, I think having a community of other like-minded businesses is always good. And the one mindset thing that really helped me in difficult conversations, and I say this to myself over and over, everyone is responsible for their own emotional reaction. So, I mean, when you're dealing with an adult, we're dealing with adults. So even if I have to have a difficult conversation with someone on the team, my responsibility is to relay that information in a clear and kind way. I cannot be responsible for that other person's emotional reaction to that information. They may be pissed, they may be bitter, they may be resentful, but I'm not responsible for that. That's coming from their experience, etc. That doesn't mean that I can't feel for them, but I'm responsible for delivering the information in a clear and kind manner. That's my responsibility. They bring their own stuff to that emotional reaction. And that really helped me, because I'm such a people pleaser and I hate confrontation, step away from what am I going to do when they react this way. And so that helping me say, I'm not responsible for that reaction. It helped me be able to deliver the information in as clear and as kind way as possible. Now, that doesn't mean go out and be an asshole about it, but it does help me realize, that doesn't mean I can't be there for them and support them, but I was always anticipating that reaction, and that's what made me feel awful. And I used to be like, I can't be in control of that, right? And so that helped me a little bit. So I think, well, we're going to wrap up with a final question. Now let me think of which is the final question that I wanted to ask. Okay, let's go with, if you could go back and do anything differently from your initial role to now, and I know, Lauren, you've only been here for a couple months, but I'm sure there's something. What would, no, forget that question. X out, we're going to go back. Rewind. If you have advice, let's do this one. I think this is a better question. If someone is stepping into this role for you, like your current role in their company, what advice do you have for someone that was going to take over your current role in another company? So Kelly, I'm going to start with you.
So I think my biggest piece of advice is to ask questions, be transparent. The hardest thing about taking over people's roles is you don't know what you don't know. So, and that's like the worst place to be, because then things can happen and you have no idea. So asking questions, not being afraid to ask for help, sitting in on whatever you possibly can to get more information. that can include talking to other team members as well, who are either in your executive team or not. Yeah, just don't be afraid to make a mistake and just keep asking questions, keep learning, keep going forward.
Yeah, I think and so I'm going to say now, from the CEO or business owner, when people ask you questions, don't berate them for it. Like if your team has a question, now, unless it's the same question 25 times, then you have to look to yourself and say, how can I make this either more clear, or what process can we put in place? Because it seems to me you're not understanding, right? And and respecting people's boundaries. One of the things I really appreciate about Kelly is she really understands her boundaries from not only a work level, but like emotionally and energetically. And she's like, I don't think I could take that on my plate right now. And I respect that, right? I respect that she can say to me, she has enough trust to say, my plate is full right now. I'm happy to take that on, but I won't be able to do that until XYZ. And so I think that that's a really good skill set that Kelly has that not everybody has. So I think that's great. Lauren, what advice would you give someone coming in as kind of like an executive director operational role for a company?
So I think it's actually fairly similar to what Kelly said, listening and learning first, trying to get as much information as possible from all 360, from all the team members, not only top down. I think sometimes you learn the most important things from the more boots on the ground team members, because they're the ones that are actually dealing with issues that might arise. And then being really clear about the expectations, both that you have and that you're fulfilling for the business owner or the CEO, sorry. So being really clear. And I remember when I first started, I'm like, this is what I'm thinking I should prioritize right now. Is that what you agree with? And because you don't know yet. Now, even just this short while in, I can already start to anticipate where the needs are. But in the beginning, I think it's really important to ask. And I don't think people mind being asked when the questions are really directed and sort of well thought out. And so I think those two things, you treat it a little bit in the beginning like you're, a traveler or a reporter going into some unknown space or story and just sort of absorbing. And then you can start to distill like certain areas that everything sort of falls into, and then move forward with an agenda on that. And then also on the accountability vein, whatever you need to manage tasks. So we use a project management software, but whatever system you use to keep yourself and others accountable is great. And if it's a centralized repository like this program or platform that we use, it's great because everything's in one spot and nobody has to go asking for stuff. So I think that's actually been something that I didn't have a ton of experience with before that's been super helpful for keeping others organized, is to have that really centralized, easy to use platform for that.
Yeah. And it eliminates like the back and forth, right? It eliminates, I don't want to say being interrupted, because again, that has a negative connotation. But if you're like me with like ADHD, like somebody asks you a question and now I completely forgot what I was doing, right? So it eliminates that and it leaves everything in one place. I will also say, from a CEO or again, owner position, I know not everyone sees themselves as CEOs. It's okay also to not know what you need. Like, I think sometimes people are like, well, I don't know, what would I give these people, right? What you know is that you need help, right? What you know is that you need help. So it's okay to even say, you know what? This is like the first role I have of this. I'm not entirely sure what I will need, but let's work together week by week, month by month. And both of these roles have evolved over time, to know what it is that you need as a person, what it is that the company needs, right? And then ultimately what's going to make everybody successful. So it's okay if you have questions too, like, how do you think you can help me better do this? And that's just where communication comes in, having clear lines of communication. I'm not a big believer in like having meetings that are not necessary, but I do believe meetings are important. So Lauren and I have a meeting every week. And then I know that Kelly and Lauren have a meeting every week. And then all three of us have a meeting every week. So if some of you are like, well, how the hell am I going to have all those meetings? But that's the whole thing, is like, you should be seeing less and less clients so that you have time to have these meetings. And they don't have to be an hour. They could be 15 minutes, just like a check-in. Are we all on the same page? So I can just say these people have both of them, and they're very respectful of my time, and they very much like do me better service because they're protective of my time, where I'm like, I'll just do that. And they're like, no, it's okay. So I would love, do you guys have any parting words? Like, we'll go to you first, Lauren. Any parting words you want to impart before we sign off?
I think just on the last thing you said, maybe, I don't know if I have any overarching words of wisdom, but on the last thing you said is, when you do have those meetings, to make them really productive, we keep running lists for those meetings, and it's really been valuable. And it's something I hadn't done in that manner in the past, but it makes it go really quickly and makes the time really useful. And you have a moment of the person's attention on a weekly basis to be able to cover all the topics in one time period. So you don't get a text and an email and a Slack and a this. You just have this prescribed, dedicated time to do these things, and you're going to get your answer on Thursday. And so it's perfect. So that's my only wisdom on that.
By the running list, we have a Google Doc. It's just a shared Google Doc, and it's literally in checkbox form. So like when we talk about it, we check it off. And so we'll all just put stuff in there like, oh, we had to talk about our recovery, like we have to decide on the pricing. We have to update the website for this. When are we doing the team dinner? Like, it could be any number of things, but she's right. That's how we do it if you want the tech for that. So what about you, Kelly? Any last minute words of wisdom you'd love to share, parting comments?
I would say just, in order to make things work just across the board, communication is just super important. Having each other's backs is really important. And then also having a structure where the people at the top are trickling down their leadership skills to everybody underneath. So like Krista, in your case, you make it easy to be able to approach you about things and learn from you. And you want to share your wisdom. You want to share the things that you've learned over time. You want to share your mistakes. You want to share what you want to change, which, I think for CEOs is like, there's just so much stuff that's going on, in like ideas that you have, things that have worked, things that haven't worked. But then really finding that team to help you execute what you can, and then maybe be like, well, let's think about that maybe for a little later, or, whatever. So just, creating just an overall space for people to work well together and communicate. That's the best thing
communication is great. And whether I say it, I probably don't say it enough, but thank you to both of you for everything that you do for the business, and which ultimately bleeds out into all of our personal lives, right? And so, and to our customers, it really is a joy to have a team like this, that we can all support each other and ultimately be doing what we love in a nice environment. So thank you for everything that you do. And I leave with, nobody comes out of the box like this, people. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, well, I could never do that. That just sounds like, this has been, 12 years in the making. Okay. A lot of it has been my own personal growth and learning how to be a better leader, learning to listen better, learning to take advice, to take feedback. I was not good at it before, still work in progress. But give yourself time. The same way we would say to our patients or clients, like, so it's going to take you over a year to get into the shape you want, or train for a marathon, or do this. It's the same thing. Okay. Give yourself the time so that everyone can move into the roles that they are fit for, right? And not everyone is fit for every roles. We talk about this in our company a lot. It's the right people first, and then they have to be in the right seat, right? They have to be the right people in the right seat. So this is part one. Be sure to stick around for part two, which will feature a few other people on our team. And if you're interested in learning how to grow a team like this, go ahead and visit the kristagurka.com website. And we have all of our business mentorship programs that you can look into, our signature FitBiz Foundations program, as well as our Inner Circle, which really kind of gears everything around growing a team so that you as CEO can step back from the day-to-day operations of the business. And until next time, my friends, bye for now.